These readings that we do every week can be, of course, very inspiring and, needing to really sit with them and go deep each week. It's a great privilege, I think, for all of us. So much comes. But every once in a while, it's also a little threatening to me. Yesterday, I was reading through this, and Master talks about even those who are trying to share these teachings are not necessarily ego-free, but here we are trying to talk about freeing ourselves from our ego, really, in essence. And I remembered a blog that Jyotish wrote some years ago. He was in the blog telling this story of, he was with Swamiji somewhere, and Swamiji was discussing a letter that he had received from someone. And in this letter, this man was expressing discouragement because he didn't feel himself to have accomplished. He was comparing himself with Swami Kriyananda. And he felt discouraged when he saw how little he had accomplished compared to Swamiji. So Jyotish was explaining this in the blog. And then he writes, this is an aside from Jyotish. And he said, comparing ourselves to great souls is always fruitless, and it should come with a warning label that says, do not try this at home. It was very relieving, actually. Do not try this at home, Shanti. I had an experience once, which I've shared with many of you, but it was impossible to resist sharing it again today. I was seeing a patient in a clinic one time, and as you know, as I've said many times, these are very short appointments that I do where I work now. And somehow in the midst of that visit, I don't remember at all why the man was there, but I quoted Jesus, very unlikely in the middle of a quick urgent care medical clinic visit, but I did. And the man looked at me, he perked up immediately, and he said to me, "Oh, are you a Christian?" And it just stopped me in my tracks because, I was a really seriously good little Jewish girl, and now I'm a self-realizationist, and this man's asking me if I'm a Christian. And I said to him, why don't we take care of you first? And then we'll answer that question, because I could just see, let's face it, we're talking about this week after week after week. Really, what is a Christian? What is a true Christian? And I had 15 minutes to take care of him, body, mind, and soul. I didn't think so. So at the end of the visit, I was happy to really try and forget the whole thing. And I turned to go, and he said to me, "Wait a minute. Do you believe that Jesus Christ was the only begotten Son of God and that he died on the cross to relieve us of our sins?" You guys have to understand, I'm the doctor there. I said to him, "No." And he said, "How did you know I wasn't going to think you were a Christian?" Oh, because, I'm sorry, I forgot. I said to him earlier, "I am a Christian, but you wouldn't think so." And it's when he said to me, "Why not?" that I said, "Let's talk about it later." So now he says to me, "How did you know I wasn't going to think you were a good Christian?" It's really interesting. We're so wrapped up in our teachings here that we can easily forget, I know I do, what so much of the world considers what is a true Christian. Master often makes it so easy for us. He came here and he first called his church the church of all religions, which just says so much. He says thus, really, in essence, this is a temple that is within each of you, and it is through your spiritual practices that you will realize Christ consciousness. He doesn't say you'll realize it if you're a Protestant or if you're a Catholic or if you're a Muslim. In fact, that really beautiful reading that David did today, I'm looking for David, there he is. I mean, it was just so utterly perfect and beautiful. Of course, that's from Whispers from Eternity, which is all of these prayer demands written by Paramhansa Yogananda. But really, make me anything as long as it allows me to find my way to you, and never let me get hung up on any of the tenets within the religion that would obscure my path to you. And this is what Master did by calling this the Church of All Religions. And even the Bible itself, which says Jesus was a God-realized being, yet he came in a human incarnation, in essence saying to us, this is for everyone. This Christ consciousness, it's not just about Jesus the man. I never read this or heard it, but I heard another minister say that Yogananda once said that he was really glad that the religions got to be called Christianity and not Jesusism. The Master said that because Christianity is so much more expansive. And Jesus came and literally said to us, everything I am, you are too, and more. Then Master went on to say many times that he came to share with us this concept of original Christianity. What does that mean? To share with all of us that what the teachings are about was really a state of consciousness, Christ consciousness, not Jesus Christ, the man. Again, saying, this is for all of us. This is the birthright of every human being. But then, as in this reading, Master goes on and he speaks of it so beautifully to talk about the ego and how at first we need this ego. There is no ego until we attain a human birth. For so many lives, he said, we've inhabited lower material forms. And it isn't until we reach the human stage that the ego is born and that we become self-conscious. And through that self-consciousness, that is literally aware of ourselves, that we begin to desire things that will actually help us grow and expand. We want to become more. We want to become better. We want to, for those of you who were here last week, Asha was so beautifully speaking about those moments where we begin to get an inkling that we actually love serving other people, that there's a great joy in that. But early on, it's that we love serving other people. Because we're ego-centered, it's all still about us. So as much as it's needed, it's a help, it's how we get going or continue our path to true self-realization, to living in a state of Christ consciousness, not ego consciousness. At some point along that path, it becomes a hindrance. It gets in our way. And Master said it so beautifully. We start really thinking we're the doers, we're the givers, we're the ones who learn, we're the ones who accomplish, who succeed. Again, that which took us further down our path suddenly gets precisely in our way. And we have to find ways to transcend that. And that is not easy. I thought that it would be fun when we talk about why it's not easy, but also how it's doable, to look at the Bhagavad Gita, because this reading from the Gita today, I don't have it right in front of me right now, but where the Gita quotes that about desire, which keeps us so bound to ourselves. I'll quote it hopefully later. And it's relentless. It's unending. Desire just begets more desire. Oh, that felt good. How about a little more? Maybe if I do this more, if I do this better, if I do it bigger, I will be happier. And we have to find a way to break our tie with those desires. So in the Gita, in this story, in the Battle of Kurukshetra, which I think most of us here have heard about this battle many times, this battle that takes place between the forces of light and dark. Light, the Pandavas; dark, the Kurus, or Kauravas. And that battle, and this is why this is so important, is exactly the battle that is part of the human condition we live with. Everything that we're about to talk about is happening inside us. It's raging inside us. And to be the winners of that battle, it's not so easy. If we look at the main characters in the Gita, we have Duryodhana, who represents, he's the leader of the Kauravas, and he is called King Material Desire. He represents not only all of our desires, which are endless and which hold us prisoners, really. He represents that battle of darkness against light, that battle that's trying to keep all of the discriminating qualities within each of us. We have that. It's all, discrimination is a soul quality. It is informed by wisdom, which comes to us through intuition only, through meditation. But our desires really keep trying to squelch that discrimination. And it really gets a hold on us. It's a very big force. And he's leading the army. He's the leader of the army that's going to fight with everything in us that wants to attain Christ consciousness. And then there's Drona, who represents habit. Again, these aren't just characters in a story. They are forces within us. And when we think of it that way, we can begin to see why we have to fight the battle that we have to fight. Why Master says, even for those who come to teach the truth, it's hard to be ego-free, because we have Duryodhana living right in our spine. And we have Drona, who represents habit, which is a downward pulling force. Swamiji says this very clearly. I remember the first time it got my attention when he wrote Material Success Through Yogic Principles. And there's a whole chapter in there that in large part is dedicated to understanding that because we allow ourselves to fall into habitual behaviors, if we don't raise our consciousness above it, habit will always side with the downward pulling energy. It just lets itself sink into unconsciousness so that the habits that we've developed, it's like encasing us in negativity until we decide to get very conscious and change our minds and change our habits. So Drona, who was equally involved with the forces of light and the forces of dark, with all of these attributes that lead us in the wrong direction, all of the desires, all of the restlessness that we live with that has us not be able to sit still. So instead we decide to call a friend or go out. Or, just recently when I took a month off, in the first 10 days of that month off, I read 5 historical fiction novels. And finally, I said to myself, Shanti, get control of yourself. This is endless. There are thousands of historical novels. But it's such a trick. It's like, oh, but they're historical novels. Look how much I'm learning. I'm not reading junk. There's no darkness here. I went on and on and on through 5 of them. How many times are we too restless to sit? So all of a sudden we think, oh, I haven't spoken to this friend in so long. And we call a friend, and an hour and a half's gone. That hour and a half becomes lifetimes. This is what happens. Drona, who was equally involved with the Pandavas and the Kauravas when they were children, because he represents habit, which will always side with downward pulling energy, he takes the side of the Kauravas in this battle. So we have Duryodhana, the leader of the Kauravas. We have Drona, habit, who's siding with them. And then we have Sanjaya, who's introspection, and we have the Pandavas, who are these discriminating qualities. But you can see how strong this battle can get. And here's what happens. The minute we decide, any of us, Master says this over and over. In fact, he calls these qualities that try and keep us in, he calls them sense Bolshevik armies, as if the Bolsheviks themselves have come to fight us. And he says the minute we try and meditate, the minute we try and bring wisdom and discrimination in, he said all of the power of desire and habit, all of what we've learned and what we've allowed ourselves to live unconsciously with for so many lifetimes, he says it's like rousing an army. And here comes desire, and here comes habit. And he even says desire would be easier to wrestle with, but once it's encased in habit, it's difficult. So we have to get conscious and ask ourselves, what are those habits? I recently had 2 very powerful experiences just to bring it to real life for us with 2 very dear friends. Excuse me. I had one really good friend who came to me who had been quite ill for several months. And I sat down with her and I said to her, okay, there's a lot we can do to help you be well. But here's the thing. Your habits are going to have you decide you don't want to change them. So if I say to you, certain dietary things are very important, thought patterns are important. You have to not let stubbornness get in the way, likes and dislikes. I'll write the prescription with you. I'll say to you, this is how I think you could get well. But you have to do it, and you have to change your mind, and you have to learn to love it. And by the way, no whining. You can't whine about it, because any little possibility that we have to become negative, to slip back into the habit. We will. This is the army, the Bolshevik army, coming to fight with us. Master himself said it. It's hard. So you do it with joy, you realize it as a possibility to attain true wellness, and you don't let yourself complain. And you know, that friend did that. It's really been remarkable watching it over months. And lo and behold, at the end of those months, not only is her body better, but her mind is in a better place. And she herself said that to me. I'm worrying less. I feel more relaxed. I feel more positive. I feel more uplifted. Here are things that happened that would have worried me before. That's the difference, even just between the body getting well and true wellness, which is on our way to Christ consciousness. It's a simple example, not so simple if you're the one that's sick, but changing our mind, letting go of old desires, really more than anything, changing our habits. I also had an encounter recently with another very dear friend who's been struggling with an addiction. And when I sat down to speak with her, I didn't say, oh boy, this is great, you have this chance. But several times in the conversation, I said, look at the beautiful opportunity you are being given to grow, to expand, to rise up above what has simply become a deep-seated desire and a habit that will not let you go. Look at the opportunity. We see it as an opportunity rather than as something that's holding us back. You know, this may feel like it's far away from this topic of what is a true Christian, but it's right on the way. This spiritual path is a continuum. These battles within ourselves are big, strong battles that we have to fight. And the more we determine to fight them, the more the resistance comes up. And remember several weeks ago we talked about, does Satan exist? These are true forces, and we have to say to ourselves, they exist within me, and I am not going to let them reign. I'm going to remember that my birthright is true Christ consciousness, that being a true Christian doesn't mean when I'm there. It has nothing to do with any boundary, any religion, anything other than this effort to realize and to support the discriminating qualities in me and to bring them to life by bringing in wisdom. And the only way to do that is to meditate. Desire reigns supreme in people who don't meditate. We don't even realize that we're being dictated to, run by desire and habits. But when we stop and we begin to say, look at this opportunity, yes, I will. I was sitting and meditating this morning, and the line just kept running through my mind. I will lift up mine eyes into the hills, from whence cometh my light. And I just thought, if we just say that, lift our eyes, but only through meditation can we end this battle that is raging, as I said before, in each of us. I had a dream once, and the dream never made any sense to me, but it stayed with me. I mean, literally for years. in the dream, I was trying to build a wall. And I didn't know why, but there was an urgency, like somebody's life would depend on my building the wall. But every time I would get it to a certain level, the wall would crumble. And I never knew what that dream meant. And then years later, I heard Joe Tisch giving a talk once, and he shared a dream that he had. And in the dream, he was trying to push a bus up a hill. And he was struggling to get this bus up the hill. But no matter how hard he pushed, he couldn't. He would go up like a foot or two and then come back, and his dream ended. And as soon as he was saying that, this dream that I had had, that had stayed with me, just came back to me. And he said when he woke up in the morning and he realized that all of the work was only a dream, he said it was so enlightening for him. And he realized that all of the work and the effort that we put out in this life to make things happen, to move things around, to have our successes, to fulfill desires, he said all of our effort should be going in to realizing that God is the doer behind all of it, that wisdom that comes in meditation. And I started thinking of all of the ways that even Master has said to us in his own life when people asked him, why do you only talk about the Bible and the Gita, but you call yourself the Church of all religions? And he said, because Babaji told me to. He said over and over to Swamiji, I asked Divine Mother several times, just to be sure. And she told me, yes, take Walter to India. There's story after story. God is the doer. And the more we can just remember that, the more we realize that all of our effort, everything that we're doing, that we plug in, that we give credit to God for our successes, for our failures, that we ask him to do everything through us, that we get closer and closer and closer to this state of Christ consciousness. And that as we meditate, as we lift up our eyes, that we realize God's presence, because otherwise those words don't mean much. God is the doer. They just, what does that mean? We're here, we're individual, we're out there, we have to make lunch, we have to get to work. It's too hard for us. But in meditation comes wisdom, comes realization. In whatever path we're on, those spiritual practices are what bring us to that place of Christ consciousness in a way, I don't want to say effortlessly, because first of all, it would contradict everything I just said. And it's not effortless, but it's one-pointed at least. It's do it this way. Give it to God. Keep giving it back to God. Don't give up. You know, that phrase that I've said up here before, Winston Churchill getting up to be the keynote speaker at an Oxford graduation, he stood up and he said, never, 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 8 times, give up. And he sat down. And it's funny, but it's not really funny. In essence, he was telling them the only thing they needed to know. Set your goal. Our goal is to be a true Christian. Our goal is to attain Christ consciousness. There's a battle raging. It's not easy, but we have all of those discriminating qualities on our side. Just never give up.